The corridors of the old house carried a quiet echo, like the walls remembered every voice that had ever spoken there. Outside, the night wind touched the windows gently, and the candles trembled as if they, too, were afraid to breathe. Oh, she had decided to leave. The maid moved carefully through the wide hallway, her fingers brushing the velvet railing as she walked toward the door. She had worked there for years, long enough to learn every shadow, every creak, every silent rule. And still her heart felt heavy, as if the house itself was asking her not to go. The widowed vampire king watched from the end of the corridor. Oh, he did not speak. For a moment, he seemed less like a king and more like someone quietly trying to hold the world together. His black coat hung softly from his shoulders, and the tiredness in his eyes carried stories he refused to share. The silence between them was not cold, it was fragile, like something about to break. She avoided his gaze. She thought living would be easier that way. The truth was simple. She was tired of the whispers about his past, the way the castle changed after his queen was gone, the strange nights when he disappeared and returned looking older, lonelier. People outside warned her that staying near him was dangerous. They did not understand the sadness she saw beneath his calm. I am grateful for everything, she said quietly, her voice almost lost in the hallway. But I cannot stay anymore. Well, she expected anger. Instead, she saw pain, deep, quiet pain flicker across his eyes. He nodded like someone accepting a destiny he didn't choose. No orders, no command to stay, only a soft, exhausted acceptance. You have served with kindness, he said, his voice low and human. I cannot ask more than that. The words surprised her. She had imagined power, control, something dark, but what she heard was gratitude, humility, a man trying not to burden anyone anymore. She bowed slightly and turned away. Her shoes touched the stone floor with slow, careful steps. Each footfall sounded like goodbye. When she reached the great wooden door, the night outside looked strangely wide and uncertain. She placed her hand on the handle and paused. Something in her chest tightened. Memories came back, the way he always made sure the staff ate before he did, the way he carried the queen's ring even when no one saw him, the quiet evenings when he stood in the garden, whispering apologies to the empty air. Oh, he was feared, but he had never once raised his voice at her. Still, she pushed the door open. A cold breath of night swept in. The sky was heavy with clouds, and the moon hid as if it knew a secret no one else did. She stepped forward, feeling the world outside in a new way, bigger, freer, and yet strangely hollow. Behind her, footsteps echoed. A slow, steady, controlled. She stopped, not turning around. His voice reached her like a distant storm, gentle yet filled with unspoken weight. Before you go, he said softly, there is something you should know. Her heart began to race. There was a tremor in his words she had never heard before, not power, not command, but fear. He sounded like a man standing at the edge of something he could not face alone. She turned slightly, eyes wide. The candles in the hall dimmed. The air felt heavier, as if the house itself was listening. He took one step closer, shadows wrapping around him like a cloak, and for the first time she saw the truth hiding beneath his calm, not a monster, not a legend, but someone desperately protecting a secret that had been slowly breaking him. Oh, you didn't quit, he whispered. You were meant to be protected, and now if you walk through that door. Well, he stopped. His jaw tightened, his hands trembled. The silence stretched, delicate and frightening. Oh, she waited. And then, with a voice filled with quiet dread, he finally said, someone has been waiting for this moment. The door swung wider as the cold wind rushed between them, and somewhere beyond the gates, something moved in the darkness. The maid swallowed, frozen halfway between safety and danger. And the Vampire King's eyes, for the first time, looked truly afraid. The door trembled in her hand as the wind pushed harder, like the night itself wanted to pull her outside. The sound beyond the gates was faint, metal brushing stone, footsteps dragging, a whisper that did not belong to any living thing she knew. She closed the door halfway again, almost without thinking. The Vampire King stood still, his expression calm on the surface, but his eyes burned with quiet urgency. He looked like a man who had spent years preparing for something, and suddenly realized it was happening too soon. "Stay inside," he said gently, not an order, a plea. Her breath shook. "Who is waiting for me?" He did not answer right away. A candle near the wall went out. Another flickered. The air cooled until she could see her breath, thin and fragile, in front of her face. He stepped closer, slower than usual, as if every movement had to be controlled. "When my queen died," he said softly, "I made enemies I did not want. There were those who believed I had grown weaker, that grief made me careless." His voice lowered. "They do not understand that grief makes you more dangerous, because you know what it means to lose everything." The maid watched him quietly. For the first time, she realized how heavy his loneliness must have been, years of silence, of careful restraint, of guarding something unseen. "But what does this have to do with me?" she whispered. His gaze softened. "Because you were kind to my son when others were afraid, because you stayed when the house felt haunted by sadness, because they believe hurting you will hurt me." Her heart sank. She had always suspected the house held secrets, but she never imagined she had become one. Outside, something brushed against the iron gate again. A low sound traveled across the courtyard, not a growl, not a human voice, something in between. The horses in the stables cried out, restless and frightened. "I should go," she said weakly. "I don't want to be the reason danger comes here." Well, he shook his head. The danger was already coming. For a moment, neither of them moved. There was just the quiet tension of two people standing between what was safe and what was unknown. Then he turned slightly, as if listening to a voice only he could hear. "Downstairs," he said, "to the old sitting room. There is a door behind the bookshelf. If anything happens, you run there, do not argue." She opened her mouth, not to disobey, but to understand, and stopped when she noticed something else. His hands were trembling, not with fear, with restraint, as if he was fighting an instinct he had sworn never to use again. "Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. "I am just a maid." He looked at her with a sadness that felt like winter. "Because someone once helped me when I was just a man," he said quietly, "and because losing one more innocent soul in this house would break what little remains of me." Her throat tightened. He moved past her toward the door, placing one pale hand against the wood. For a moment, he simply stood there, breathing slowly, like someone saying goodbye to a calm he knew he wouldn't see again. Then he unlatched it. Cold poured in, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and distant rain. The courtyard stretched out like a dark, endless ocean. The torches along the walls were nearly swallowed by shadows. "Go," he whispered without looking back. She hesitated, every instinct pulling her in different directions, but the sincerity in his voice left no space for argument. She turned and hurried down the hall, her footsteps echoing softly, heart-pounding. As she reached the stairs, she heard his voice, deeper now, older, touched by something ancient. "If they cross the gate," he murmured to the night, "they will remember why they feared me." The maid stopped halfway down. A strange feeling washed through her, not fear of him, but fear of what he might have to become. She wanted to turn back, she wanted to say something, anything, but before she could, the sound of iron shattered the quiet. Well, the gate had opened, and from the darkness beyond, a figure stepped inside, tall, cloaked, moving with slow confidence, as if they had been waiting years for this exact moment. Well, the Vampire King did not move. The maid pressed herself against the wall, hidden by shadow, her heart beat loud in her ears. Oh, the stranger lifted their head. And when they spoke, the voice carried both familiarity and threat. "So," the stranger said softly, "you finally let someone close again." Well, the maid froze. She had heard that voice once before, faint, distant, full of bitterness. And the king, standing at the threshold, whispered a name she never expected to hear. The name of someone he should have never seen again. The night tightened around the house, and everything she thought she understood began to crumble. The night seemed to lean closer, listening. The maid stayed hidden against the wall, her fingers pressed into the cold stone, afraid even her breathing might betray her. The stranger stepped farther into the courtyard, the cloak shifting like moving shadows. A soft mist curled around their boots, spreading across the stones as if the ground itself recognized them. The vampire king's shoulders straightened, not with pride, but with quiet sorrow. "You," he said, his voice low, steady, carrying years of memories he clearly wished he could forget. The cloaked figure laughed softly, not cruelly, but with the sadness of someone who had waited too long. "You sound disappointed," the stranger replied. "After everything we went through, I thought you might at least say my name with warmth." The maid frowned, listening. There was something strange in that voice, something deeply personal, almost intimate. Not the voice of an enemy who hated, the voice of someone who had once cared. The king did not respond at first. His hand hovered near the door, not quite closing it, not quite welcoming the night inside. "You should not be here," he said quietly. "Too much has been lost already." The stranger stepped into the faint candlelight. A pale face emerged beneath the hood, not monstrous, not cruel, but familiar in a way that made the maid's heart twist. The eyes were tired, restless, filled with resentment held for too many years. And suddenly, she understood. This was not a mortal enemy. This was family. "You mourned her," the stranger whispered, bitterness trembling beneath each word. "But you never mourned what you did to the rest of us." The king closed his eyes for just a moment, as if the words struck somewhere old and unhealed. "Grief makes mistakes," he said softly, "and I have carried mine every night." The maid felt something shift inside her. The world had been painted in simple colors before, king, monster, danger, but now everything blurred. This was a man still caught between love and guilt, strength and regret. The stranger's eyes moved past the king toward the hallway. Toward her. She pressed harder into the shadow, holding her breath. "And now," the stranger murmured, "you think hiding behind kindness will save you. You bring ordinary people into your sorrow, let them live among ghosts and secrets, and call it mercy." The king's gaze turned sharp, protective. "She chose to work here," he replied, "and she has done nothing wrong." "That is exactly the problem," the stranger said gently. "Innocent people always pay the price for us." For a moment, the courtyard fell silent. A soft bell in the distance chimed the late hour. Somewhere inside the house, a door creaked. The world felt fragile, like glass prepared to crack with the slightest touch. The stranger took another step closer. "I didn't come here to fight you," they said. "I came to take what should never have been left in your care." The king's jaw tightened, his voice deepened. "What are you talking about?" The stranger's eyes filled with something complicated, anger wrapped around love, disappointment wrapped around loyalty. Your son." The maid's heart jolted. The vampire king went still, as if the world had locked into place around him. "He is not yours to protect anymore," the stranger continued softly. "You have enemies circling this house. They know your grief, your hesitation, your refusal to become who you once were. They know you would spare everyone else before you defended yourself." The king spoke through clenched restraint. "I will not let them touch him." The stranger tilted their head. "You cannot guard him and your heart at the same time." The maid felt a sudden ache, not fear of darkness, but fear of loss. The boy had always seemed so quiet, so gentle, forever wandering the halls with books under his arm. He had already lost his mother. To take him away now felt like tearing the only remaining thread holding the king to this world. But maybe that was why they wanted it. You think removing him will save him, the king said softly, almost pleading. But it will only teach him that love disappears when danger comes. A painful silence followed. The stranger's voice broke for the first time. Love already disappeared once. And then the maid heard footsteps on the staircase above. Soft, careful, curious. The boy. She turned slightly and saw the faint outline of him standing at the top of the stairs, small against the darkness, eyes wide, drawn by voices he should never have heard. Oh, he did not speak. Oh, the stranger did not move. The vampire king slowly turned, realizing what had happened, and in that one moment, fear unlike anything before crossed his face. Not fear of enemies, not fear of betrayal. Fear of losing the only person left who made the nights feel less endless. The boy took one uncertain step down. The stranger whispered, almost lovingly, "He deserves a life not built on grief and danger." The maid's heart pounded. The wind surged through the door again. The candles flickered violently. And the vampire king finally spoke, voice breaking through the night like a quiet storm. "If you take him, you will tear apart the last promise I ever made." The boy's foot hesitated on the stair. The stranger lowered their hood completely. Their eyes glistened, and the maid understood something terrifying. No matter what choice was made, someone was going to break. The night held its breath. The boy stared down at his father. The stranger opened their arms gently. And in that heavy, suspended moment, the maid whispered to herself, "Please don't let this house lose one more heart." But the decision was already forming. And nothing from here would stay the same. The boy's small hand rested on the railing, pale in the dim light. He looked from the stranger to his father, then down toward the hall where the maid stood hidden in the shadows. No one spoke. The silence felt heavier than any storm. The vampire king slowly turned his body, placing himself gently between the boy and the open door, as if his presence alone might shield him from every unseen danger outside. "You should be in your room," he said softly, his voice careful, almost fragile. The boy swallowed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I heard someone say my name." The stranger's expression softened, like ice beginning to crack. "You're taller," they murmured quietly. "You look just like." The king cut in, gentle but firm. "Don't." That one word carried so much pain, the maid felt it like a cold wave. The stranger lowered their eyes. For a moment, grief filled the courtyard, not loud, not dramatic, just present, honest, undeniable. The boy took another step down, curiosity pulling him forward. "Who are you?" he asked. The stranger hesitated. The vampire king closed his eyes briefly, as if gathering strength, then opened them again and spoke with calm dignity. "Someone from our past," he said. "Someone who loved your mother and never forgave me for surviving her." The boy blinked slowly. The stranger's jaw trembled, as though every memory hurt. "I held her hand," they whispered. "I promised her I would watch over you, and when I came back, there was only this house full of shadows." The boy looked at his father, searching his face, reading the silent emotions there. "Is that true?" The king didn't hide. He nodded. And in that small movement, the maid saw his humility, not defending himself, not twisting truth, only standing inside it. "I grieved badly," he said softly. "I closed doors I shouldn't have. I pushed away people who were trying to help, and I have paid for that every night since." The stranger laughed quietly, but there was no cruelty in it anymore, only tired sadness. You locked the world out, they said, and called it protection. The king looked at the boy. I was afraid, he whispered, afraid of losing him too. The maid felt warmth rise in her chest. There it was, the truth beneath all the fear and legend and whispered rumors. A father trying not to break. The stranger turned to the boy again. You deserve sunlight, they said softly. You deserve friends, laughter, mornings that aren't filled with ghosts. The boy listened carefully, his eyes thoughtful. And if I leave, he asked gently, who will stay with him? The question fell through the night like a stone dropped into deep water. The vampire king stiffened, not from pride, but from quiet, helpless honesty. Well, he had no answer. The stranger looked away. Even they had not expected that. The maid felt her heart twist painfully. She remembered late nights seeing the king walk alone through the garden, whispering to the memory of the queen. She remembered the way he paused outside his son's door, listening, making sure the boy slept peacefully before continuing his lonely wandering. A man who hurts alone is still hurting. The boy stepped down one more stair, closer to both of them, his voice steady though his hands trembled. I don't want to be taken away like a secret, he said. I want to choose. The stranger blinked, surprised. A choose, they repeated. Yes, the boy said softly. I want safety, but I also want my father. I want a life, but not one that means leaving him behind to drown. A single tear slipped from the stranger's eye, not weakness, but release. The vampire king's chest rose sharply, as if hope had been placed in his hands and he didn't know how to hold it. But before anyone could answer, a sound cut through the air. Not from the gate, but from the woods beyond. Low, distant, many footsteps. The stranger's head snapped toward the darkness. The king's expression hardened immediately, not cruel, not monstrous, focused. They're here sooner than I expected, he murmured. The maid's heart leapt into her throat. The boy looked frightened now, clutching the railing tighter. The stranger took a step forward, cloak shifting, eyes alert. Then it doesn't matter who's right, they said quietly. We don't have time. The king turned toward the hallway, voice steady but urgent. Take him, he said to the maid, finally acknowledging her presence. Downstairs, behind the bookshelf, and no matter what you hear, you do not come back out. Their eyes met. For the first time, he did not look distant or unreachable. He looked human, and terrified not for himself, but for them. As she nodded, though fear shook her bones. The boy hesitated, glancing back at his father. Will you be okay? The vampire king forced a small, gentle smile. I have been afraid for years, he said softly. Tonight I will finally stop running from it. The stranger stepped beside him, tension and history still heavy between them, but something new now, a fragile, uneasy alliance. We stand together, they said quietly, for her, for him, for what's left. The wind howled through the courtyard. Branches shook. Shadows moved beyond the walls. The maid took the boy's hand, guiding him toward the stairs, heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear anything else. Behind her, she heard the king whisper something, a promise, maybe a prayer. And as they reached the bottom of the steps, the boy looked up at her with wide, frightened eyes and asked, what happens if he doesn't come back? Her breath faltered. She couldn't answer, because in that moment, she wasn't sure either. And above them, the door groaned, the night pressed in closer. And the first shape stepped out of the darkness. The shape moved slowly out of the trees, then another, and another, not rushing, not attacking, only circling like shadows learning how to breathe. The torches along the courtyard walls flickered, throwing broken light across stone and mist. From the hidden passage, the maid and the boy could still hear everything. She pressed her back to the wall, listening, torn between obeying and wanting to run back to help. Above them, the vampire king stepped forward, shoulders calm, eyes steady. The stranger remained at his side, cloak brushed by the cold wind, their expression sharpened with purpose. "Show yourselves," the king said quietly. "You came this far, do not hide behind darkness." For a moment, the night resisted. Then the figures finally stepped into the light. They were not monsters. They were people, quiet, cloaked, worn by fear, faces lined with hunger, anger, and something else, desperation. Their eyes held the wild tension of those who believed danger was the only language left. The one in front, older than the rest, spoke first. "Years ago you ruled with strength," they said. "No one touched this land, no one starved here. Then grief took you and everything fell apart." There was no accusation in the voice, only exhaustion. The king listened without anger. "You think I chose my grief," he replied softly. "I lost my queen, I almost lost myself. The cost of surviving was forgetting how to live." Another figure stepped forward, voice trembling. "We have children," they said. "We have no protection, no guidance. Your enemies grew bold because you disappeared." The stranger glanced at the king, not blaming, but confirming the truth. The king lowered his gaze. "I know," he said quietly, "and I carry that failure, but threatening my home will not heal anything." The older figure looked toward the house. "We did not come to kill," they said. "We came because we heard a rumor that you still have power, that you simply refuse to use it, and others, far worse than us, are coming to take advantage of that." A cold realization washed through the maid. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a warning. Upstairs, the stranger folded their arms. "So you came first," they murmured, "to force him to choose." The leader nodded. "Either stand again as the protector you once were," they said quietly, "or step aside and let someone else claim your throne." Those words cut through the courtyard like winter. The boy squeezed the maid's hand tighter in the dark passage. "They want him to become something he promised he wouldn't," he whispered. She nodded slowly. The vampire king closed his eyes, breathing in deeply, as if trying to gather every shattered piece of himself. "I vowed," he said softly, "never to rule with fear again." The older figure looked at him gently. "We are not asking for fear," they replied. "We are asking for courage." The silence stretched. Wind pressed against the walls. Candles trembled. And far beyond the hills, thunder rolled distant, heavy, like footsteps from something still on its way. The stranger leaned close to the king, voice low. "They're right about one thing," they whispered. "Someone worse is coming, and if you stand unprepared, you lose everyone, including him." His eyes softened and pain flickered there. "If I become who I used to be," he murmured, "I might lose myself." Or, the stranger answered quietly, "you might discover you never had to choose between strength and kindness." Downstairs, the boy looked toward the secret door, unsure whether to stay hidden or run back. He whispered, "I want to help him." The maid shook her head, heart aching. "Oh, your place is safe," she said softly. "His place is in front of them." But her own mind argued with itself. Oh, should she stay? Or should she trust? Should she do nothing while the world above trembled? A sudden vibration shook the floor. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Not from the courtyard, from farther away. Something heavier had entered the land. The older figure looked toward the horizon, fear piercing their eyes for the first time. "They've arrived," they whispered. The stranger's hand tightened around the edge of their cloak. The vampire king lifted his head, a calm, deep, and unfamiliar settling over him. Not rage, not darkness, Resolve. He turned slightly, looking back at the doorway leading inside, the direction of the boy, the maid, everything left worth protecting. And in that quiet breath, almost too soft for anyone else to hear, he said, "Then tonight I learn how to be both." The wind surged. The torches bent. The night split open with distant, echoing footsteps that did not belong to anyone human. The boy stared upward, frozen. The maid felt her heart drop. And in that charged, fragile moment, just before the unseen threat crossed the final line, the last candle in the corridor went out. The darkness didn't explode, it deepened. It wrapped the courtyard, the walls, the trees beyond, until the world felt as if it were holding its breath. Even the wind silenced as though something sacred or dangerous was about to be decided. The maid tightened her grip on the boy's hand. Above, the vampire king stepped forward, letting the darkness settle around him. It did not swallow him, it recognized him. The shadows seemed to bow. The stranger watched carefully, unsure, afraid not of him, but of what this moment might cost. From beyond the gate, shapes emerged again. Not desperate villagers, not cloaked wanderers. These figures moved with precision, with hunger, with cold eyes that did not understand mercy. Armor shimmered faintly under the thin moonlight, marked with sigils meant to bind, control, and break. Hunters. Their letters smiled without warmth. "We heard rumors," they said quietly, "that the great vampire king had become gentle." The word was spoken like an insult. The king did not answer. He simply stood, shoulders steady, gaze unshaken. And when a king forgets his strength, the hunter continued, the world forgets its fear. The stranger took a quiet breath. "They don't want land," they murmured to him. "They want your surrender." The boy, listening from below, whispered, "Well, they came to take everything." The maid nodded, her heart trembling, "But they don't understand him." The hunters moved closer. The lead one raised a hand, and in that moment, something shifted inside the king. Not anger, not darkness. A clarity. His voice came out calm, low, deeply human. "Fear does not build peace," he said softly, "and cruelty does not build kingdoms." The hunter's smirk faded slightly. "Then what do you rule with now?" He looked toward the house, toward the hidden rooms, toward the life he had almost lost to grief. "With responsibility," he answered, "and with love that refuses to disappear." The words were simple, but they landed with quiet power. The hunters tensed. They were not used to strength that did not roar. The older villager, the one who had first spoken, stepped back, suddenly understanding something. This was not the return of an old tyrant. This was someone learning how to stand without crushing what he protected. The hunters advanced anyway. The stranger leaned closer. "You can stop them," they whispered, "without becoming who you fear." The king closed his eyes briefly, listening to something deeper than instinct. And when he opened them again, the night itself seemed to breathe differently. He did not bear fangs. He did not rage. He did not strike first. He spoke. "Leave this land," he said, voice carrying through the darkness. "Not because you fear me, but because I will not let you harm anyone here." The hunters laughed, short, sharp, dismissive. "You cannot command us with words." He didn't try to. He stepped forward just one step. The earth underfoot responded. Not breaking, not splitting, simply remembering. The air thickened with power, old, restrained, controlled, not a weapon, a boundary. The torches steadied. The shadows rose like gentle guardians, forming an invisible line across the courtyard. The hunters froze. Not trapped, stopped. They tried moving again. The ground refused them. The stranger stared, awe softening their eyes. You never lost your strength, they whispered. You just forgot how to use it without hurting yourself. The king's gaze stayed steady. There is no glory in violence, he said softly. There is only cost. Leave now while leaving is still your choice. The leader of the hunters met his eyes and for the first time hesitated. Not because of threats, but because there was nothing to hate, nothing to justify harm. Only a wall of quiet conviction. Slowly, grudgingly, they lowered their weapon. One by one, the hunters stepped back, then turned, the symbols on their armor fading into the mist as they disappeared into the trees. No blood, no cruelty, no victory shouted, just danger dissolving into night. The villagers watched, stunned, and then bowed not to a tyrant, but to a protector who had chosen restraint over dominance. The stranger released a long, shaky breath. Maybe grief didn't break you, they said softly. Maybe it taught you another way. The king did not smile, but there was peace around his eyes. We still have work to do, he replied gently, together. The villagers slipped away quietly, carrying the memory of a king who did not rule through fear, and that memory would travel farther than any legend. The courtyard slowly softened again. The night warmed. Candles relit. Down below, the maid exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The boy's hand loosened slightly, though he still trembled. Can we go up? He whispered. She nodded. When they emerged from the hidden passage, the boy ran not recklessly, but with the urgent need to feel something real. He stopped in front of his father. They looked at each other not as king and heir, but as two people who had almost lost each other again. You stayed, the boy whispered. I always will, the king replied softly. The stranger stood nearby, eyes shining. Then let me stay too, they said gently. Not as a judge, not as a rival, as family, someone who helps carry the weight. The king hesitated only a moment before nodding. A new beginning, fragile, imperfect, honest, settled into the home. The maid watched silently, emotions swelling in her chest. She remembered why she had wanted to leave. She now understood why she couldn't. The king turned to her, gratitude quiet and sincere. You were going to walk away from this house tonight, he said softly, and still you stayed when it mattered. I didn't stay because of duty, she answered gently. I stayed because kindness stays. Something warm passed between them, respect, trust, and a quiet promise that no one would carry the night alone again. Outside, the sky slowly opened, and gentle light, not sunrise yet, but something hopeful spread across the horizon. The house no longer felt haunted. It felt alive. The queen's memory remained, not as a wound, but as a guiding hand over all of them. And for the first time in a long time, the Vampire King walked back inside his home, not as a shadowed legend, but as a protector who had learned how to love without disappearing. The door closed softly behind them, and the night finally rested.